Hey guys, it's Misty with My Paper Cuts, and today is day 6 of my hashtag A Different Kind of December daily. And tonight I'm coming on to share a couple of cards that I finished, still working with this paper pad here. The other night I came on and shared some of the die cut images and stamped images that I had done to go with this paper collection, and kind of shared my plan. My process when I mass produce cards, which I do very frequently. I do have a stash now that is approaching 900 cards. I make, multiples at a time. I do have a more than full-time job. I do have a foster dog that is ill that I take care of, and I do have commitments to our family-owned dog rescue. So it is important to me to take time every day to stop and create, and not only things I'm committed to, but things just to make for the sake of making. And I think it's very important, even if you only have 15 minutes, to do something with this hobby that we have so much time and money invested into, and space in our homes. It's an outlet. It clears your mind. It relieves the stress, and it just feels really good to create, and to, not only to make gifts for others, but to just make something. So every day I get in here, and today was a great day because I've been in here since I poured my first cup of coffee. So I'm gonna go ahead and share. I finished 2 of the cards that I had started with this collection, and I've been sharing my process all along the way of how I mass produce. So I showed you guys, the images, how I do the multiples. I get those done, and then I make all my card bases. I get those done, and then I finish out the cards. And today I'm going to show you how I store all my cards, because since I do have so many, storage is important. I do take them to work and sell them to my coworkers. I do take them to craft fairs and sell them to friends. And so I need them to be portable. I need them to be protected and dust free. And like right now, I'm making all these Christmas cards, which obviously I won't use all of them this season. So I'll need to store them for next year. So the storage system that I have, I will keep my Christmas cards in there until Christmas is over, and then I will box them up and put them away until next year, and then I'll get them out and store them the way that I do right now. I like to keep the current holiday out. When that holiday is over, I do store them into a closet, and then I'll pull them back out, because I can't, just storing all 900 cards in one spot is not going to work. That's just way too much room. And space is valuable when you do this hobby. So I'm going to go ahead and share the cards that I completed today. I did have one question from when I was talking about card bases and cardstock and finishing off your cards, and I wanted to go over that real quick. So I do stamp the back of my cards with this little stamp that I bought a few years ago from Bossy Jossie. And now I have a whole new stamp that says handmade by Misty Campbell, thanks to my Secret Santa. Thank you again, Becky. I love it so much. And now I even have a return address stamp with my name and address on it, which was just wonderful that she made those for me for my Secret Santa. So I'm excited that I won't just be using this one anymore. But I do stamp the backs of all my cards. And one of the questions I had was, well, what if it's a dark colored cardstock? Because I do love to make with black cardstock and dark gray and navy blue and dark brown. And my answer to that, the short answer is I heat emboss it. So I heat emboss it in white or sometimes gold, kind of whatever will tie into the front of the card. So yeah, so I just heat emboss it on there, and that just, it's nice. It doesn't rub off. You can see it nice and clear. So that is how I do that. And I want to give a shout out to P. She sent me this embossing ink for my birthday. Normally I just use VersaFine. I have tried a few other embossing inks, and I always seem to go, or not VersaFine, Versamark. I always go back to the Versamark. And then P sent me this, and I love this embossing pad. So if any of you have the opportunity to pick this up and you don't have an embossing ink yet, I highly recommend this one. And I wanted to give another big shout out, thank you to P for sending me this. I absolutely love it, girl. So to go ahead and share the cards that I made, the first one that I did was with the log cabin that I showed you guys that I had die cut out of that wood grain paper. And for this card, it's obviously the house background paper. And then for the snowbank, I didn't want to use white because this is not a stark white, and so white would have just been too much. And so what I did was I cut the top off of this large scene paper. And I do that pretty frequently with these scene papers, is I use whatever there is of just a pattern or a solid color that's kind of the background of that scene. If I'm not going to use the image, I might as well get use out of the rest of the paper. So that's what I'll do. So I just chopped off the top 6 inches of this, and I used that as my snowbanks for these cards. And I really like the different vibe of this. I like the darkness. I don't know, it's just something a little different, and it just is nice and vintage. The trees are die cut from a specialty cardstock it's a green cardstock with dark leaves on it. The leaves are a velvet. I feel like velvet, it just screams vintage to me. So I was really happy with how those turned out. And then one of the tips that I want to give as well on this card is this die cut word here. One of my favorite techniques, and I've told you guys lots of times, is I layered it up on cardstock there. I don't know if you guys can see that real well, but it is on 3 layers of craft cardstock, and then this top layer is a metallic gold. And there's 2 issues you might come across with trying to do something like this. One is these tiny little flourishes and these little lines in the letters can make it hard to glue these pieces down and make it nice and neat. And the other thing is when you use liquid glue, if you're pushing down to get those layers to stick together and you get the glue on your fingers and you touch this foiled paper, especially if it happened to be a glossy one, you're going to get fingerprints. It's going to pull off the foil, or, you know, it's just going to dull the finish, and it's just not, it's going to look messy. And plus it'll be tacky on top of it. So when I layer up like this, I use spray adhesive. I do like this Elmer's Craft Bond. Even this little can like this, it'll last a long time, especially just for something like this, because it just takes one little and that's it. That's all you need. But when you do this, you could still get the tackiness on your fingers. And the thing with foiled papers is if you press down really hard on foiled paper, you can dent it. And so the way I avoid that is I layer all my pieces together, I get them all positioned, and then I use my acrylic blocks, and that's what I press down with when I do the words. So I get nice even pressure across all of the surfaces, so I don't have any buckling or anything, and I get a nice clean finish to my metallic paper. So that is my hint for doing those layering. Spray adhesive is great. Just make sure you use it in a ventilated area. I don't necessarily take it outside. I just leave a window open and crank up the ceiling fan, and I'm good to go. So, and then the inside of this card is stamped with a border stamp that is from this stamp set that is a Sheena stamp set that we got at Tuesday Morning last year. And I just stamped that onto my liner. I always put a liner on the inside of my cards. Even if I use a white card base, I still add a liner. It's just something I've always done. And this is stamped in Stormy Sky Distress Oxide ink. And I just love the color. I think it ties into the card nicely. So that is that card. And then the second card I did was with the Santa that I demonstrated on my brother Scan and Cut the other night, the way that I cut them out and put them onto foam. So trying to avoid the glare here. Here we go. So this stamp set is from Simon Says Stamp. It's called Swell Christmas, and this is the Santa face that I used. I had also stamped these bells for the inside liner of the card. And for the card, I used this Have a Swell and Christmas. I just feel like it suits this paper and that retro vintage type vibe. And here is the card. So like I showed the other night, it is popped up on that foam, which means this is solid. It's not going to sag. It's not going to get smashed in the mail. That is my favorite thing about that. It is mounted on a green shimmer paper that I cut out with a circle die that has cross stitch pattern on it, which again just kind of matches this tone of this paper. It is mounted on this die cut shape, which is a belly band from Spellbinders. I layered that on top of a red Swiss dot paper, and then I just trimmed the edges because this was the largest die, but I still wanted a layer. And then the sentiment is stamped in Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide, which Distress Oxide and all the oxide colors have a pigment ink in them. So they are slower to dry, so you have time to heat emboss with them. And so instead of buying a whole bunch of colors of embossing powder, if you have a pigment ink that is slow drying enough, you can heat emboss on top. And another option that you can do is you could, if you have a stamp positioner like a Misty or like the Tim Holtz one, is you can stamp in a dye ink, stamp again in an embossing ink, and then you can heat emboss on top of any color of dye ink that you have. Dye ink you cannot emboss on because it dries too fast, but if you were able to stamp over the top with your embossing ink, then you could turn that into a colored embossed image as well. So you don't necessarily have to buy a lot of colors of embossing powder as long as you have slow drying inks or an embossing ink to go with it. You can just use clear. So that is the front of the card. The cool thing is in that stamp set is there were these little stars which just happened to be almost identical to the ones that were in the pattern paper. So I repeated that and picked it up and stamped them in the gray, just like the pattern paper. And I put a little dot of mercury glass stickles in the center. And then on the Santa himself, I did a dot of glossy accents on his nose. There's something magical about Santa's nose for some reason. And then on his bell, I'm trying to catch the light there, I did just a little touch of Wink of Stella glitter pen, and then over the top of that, I did a drop of glossy accents. So you get the shine from the glossy accents, but there's also just a little bit of sparkle underneath it. I find that Wink of Stella and the Spectrum Noir pens with the glitter in them, I find that that rubs off after it's dry. So when I use them, I really like to seal them in with glossy accents or clear embossing powder so that you still get the sparkle, but it won't rub off. And then the inside of that, that's what those bells that I showed you guys the other night. And like I said, I just drew a line in between. So there was a string. I drew some little doodly bows on top of them. And then I put strips of that Swiss dot paper on the inside as well. So those are the two cards I finished today. And then I'm sorry I'm rambling on so long, but I guess I just have lots to say these days. So the way that I store my cards is for hot dog fold cards, I buy these from Amazon, and they're from Unique Packing, and they are the A2 Plus, which means they also hold an envelope, and they're a little bit bigger than an A2 card. And when I get a pack of 100, this gives me, with the technique that I use, enough dust covers, I guess you could call them, enough storage pockets for 50 of my cards, because I use 2 for each one for the hot dog fold or the vertical fold or portrait fold, however you want to call it, type cards. So what I do is I pull out half of the envelopes, which look like this. So they have, this is the pocket here, and then this is the flap with you remove the little strip and then it's sticky. And the idea is when you have a card that it just slides down in there and you fold the flap over and you can store it with the envelope as well. So I prefer, because I do sell at craft fairs and I do sell to coworkers, I take half of them and I cut that top piece off. Hopefully you guys can see that there. So I cut that top flap off of half. I take the envelope now that doesn't have the flap on the top, and I put my envelope in there, and then I take the back of the card and I slide that and the envelope into the one that doesn't have a flap anymore. And I just slide it up to the fold. And then I take the one that has the flap and I slide that over the front of the card and line up the bottoms there, and then I fold the flap over and stick it down. So now you have to pretend there's an envelope in there. Now you have dust covers. People can handle them, but they can still open them and see what the inside of the card says. and everything is very well protected and sealed in. So like here's one that is done. So the envelope is in there in the back. They're stuck together, so you can easily see the front and the inside of the card, and it's very protected from fingers. And trust me, at craft fairs, people get grabby with their fingers. Sticky kids and everything. So, and then the way that I do the hamburger folds is from clearbags.com, and I'm waiting for an order to come, is they make something that they actually call a card sleeve. So it is just one sheet of plastic, and then it has fold over little pockets on either side. And so what you do with these is you take your envelope and the back of your card and you tuck them into one of the pockets, and then you take the other one and you have to bend it back a little bit, but shouldn't hurt it, and then you tuck that into the other envelope, and then it's like a dust cover, or like a book cover. And so then you have a nice cover, and it does, I mean, it doesn't cover the whole inside of your card, but at least it covers where people naturally tend to grab these kind of cards to look at them, and everything is nice and dust protected. And then to store all my cards, I do have a little shelf in my craft room where I store my cards, and each season I get out whatever holiday cards I have, and then year round I keep on that shelf all of my general theme, like birthday, thank you, sympathy, thinking of you, love, wedding, baby, those types of themes are all on the shelves year round. And then I have bins that are assigned just for the holiday. So this is a bin of my Christmas cards, and these are DVD bins. They're just a hard plastic with handles on each end, as you can see here. And they hold my cards. There's a little wiggle room so that nothing's crammed in here real tight. They're all in their plastic sleeves, so I can flip through just like this and pull out the cards. And like I said, because I have them stored the way that I do, I can flip them open if I don't remember what the inside said. And that is how I store them. And then when Christmas is over, I will take all my Christmas cards out of these bins and keep them in boxes until next season. And I do have empty ones that aren't labeled that hold just the current holiday, like I said. And then I have other ones that are labeled, so each theme has its own bin and they're just up on a shelf. So that is how I store my cards and how I protect them. And these are the 2 cards that I did today. So again, sorry it took so long, you guys. Sorry I rambled so much. I hope I helped you a little bit, maybe inspired you to dig in, make some cards, maybe gave you some helpful tips like this. This is an awesome thing to have in your stash. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.